Nissan has lived more lives than most automakers could survive. A scrappy beginning under the name Datsun, a meteoric rise into global motorsport royalty, a catastrophic collapse into debt, a daring rescue by a Brazilian-Lebanese cost-cutter from France, and an early leap into electric vehicles that should have crowned Nissan the king of EVs forever. But today, Nissan is wobbling around like a boxer who won the first 8 rounds and then suddenly forgot he was supposed to keep his hands up. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Pro Street TV, where we are going into the rise, ruin, and the next steps for one of Japan's most storied automakers. Once a brand that built icons, the 240Z, the GT-R, the Silvia, now makes headlines for CVT lawsuits and delayed EV launches. This is the story of how Nissan went from Datsun to dominant to almost dead to saved to innovator and finally to unfortunately asking the universe, hey, are we still, relevant? Chapter 1. The Origins of Nissan Datsun. Before Nissan became Nissan, it was a collection of companies with names that sound like items from a Fallout game vendor list. Tobata Casting, Kwai Shinsha Motor Car, and DAT Automobile Company. DAT built tiny trucks that were sometimes decent and sometimes exploded. Because, hey, it was the 1930s in Japan. Reliability wasn't exactly a thing yet. The company merged, restructured, rebranded, then restructured, then rebranded, basically acting like a student switching majors every semester. But the name that stuck was Datsun. Why Datsun? Because DAT built a small car they called the Datsun, meaning son of DAT. Then they changed it to Datsun because son in Japanese sounds like loss, which is honestly not the vibe any company wants. Chapter 2. Datsun comes to America. Sort of like Eddie Murphy. Fast forward to 1958, and Datsun arrives in the US with their first exports. The Big Three laughed. Then, the fuel crisis hit the US in the 1970s, and suddenly, nobody wanted cars that drank gasoline like they were training for a frat party. People wanted small, dependable, fuel-sipping cars that, ideally, didn't burst into flames. Datsun was accidentally in the perfect position. Cheap, reliable, not embarrassing to drive. Pretty much the anti-American car of the time. Chapter 3. Introducing the 510 and the 240Z, cars that changed everything. 2 cars transformed Datsun from, hey, who makes that thing, into a legitimate automotive powerhouse. The Datsun 510 was the first, a simple, boxy, unassuming little sedan. Until you actually drove it, it handled like a BMW for the price of a microwave. Tuners loved it. Racers loved it. Anyone with a wrench and a dream loved it. And of course, the 240Z in 1969, Japan's answer to overpriced European sports cars. You wanted a Jaguar E-Type look, Porsche vibes, and actual reliability? Boom! 240Z. $3,500 brand new. More power than you needed, less weight than your lawnmower. And absolutely gorgeous. The Z didn't just sell well, it became a phenomenon that reshaped America's perception of Japanese cars forever. Datsun had officially arrived, and more importantly, they weren't going away. Chapter 4. The transformation into the Nissan we know and love today. By the late 1970s, Datsun was crushing it globally, which, of course, meant it was time for a bold marketing decision. A bold, expensive, and arguably unnecessary marketing decision. Datsun decided to rename itself Nissan in the early 1980s. Price tag? About $500 million. Why change a name everyone knows and trusts? Good question. One which Nissan still hasn't fully answered to this day. The rebrand confused the hell out of the American public. People walked into dealerships asking, "I want a Datsun. What the hell is a Nissan?" Salesmen just smiled and pointed at the badge. Chapter 5. The 80s and 90s. Nissan rises to prominence. Confusion or not, the 80s and 90s were Nissan's golden era. This was when they built some of the greatest cars ever to roll out of Japan. Let's name a few, in case your nostalgia isn't already punching you in the heart. 1989 R32 GT-R, aka Godzilla. R33 GT-R, the chunkier, faster Godzilla. R34 GT-R, the holy grail of tuner culture, Silvia S chassis, drift royalty. And the 300Z XZ32, a twin-turbo spaceship. Lesser known is the Pulsar GT-R, a rally monster disguised as a hatchback. And last but not least was the Imasai GTP 300ZX, a track-bred monster that slayed exotics for fun. Nissan wasn't just good. They were untouchable in engineering, racing, and performance tech. Unfortunately, being amazing at engineering and being good with money are not the same thing. Which leads us to Chapter 6. The Debt Avalanche and How It Put Nissan in a Chokehold. By 1996, Nissan was sitting on $22 billion in debt. Yes, billion, with a B. That's the type of debt that makes accountants walk into the ocean. Here's the problem. Nissan's engineers kept building incredible cars, and management kept ignoring profitability like it owed them money. They had too many platforms, too many models, too many factories, too few customers, and absolutely zero profits. Their cars were great. Their balance sheets were a crime scene. If someone didn't step in soon, Nissan was done. And then, someone did. A man who would change everything. A man who would save Nissan, and eventually, years later, escape Japan in a musical equipment box like a low-budget Jason Bourne. Chapter 7. Saving Nissan. By the late 90s, Nissan was drowning. Sales were down, debt was up, dealers were sad, shareholders were suicidal. Nissan was so desperate, they practically put themselves on Craigslist. One slightly used Japanese automaker, lots of potential, just needs TLC, or billions of dollars. Peugeot Citroën sniffed around. Ford said, "Nah, we're good." Daimler-Benz was busy trying to figure out Chrysler. Then came Renault. Renault wasn't the biggest automaker, they weren't the richest automaker, but they saw something no one else saw. A company with world-class engineering that couldn't manage a lemonade stand. So, in 1999, Renault stepped in and bought a controlling interest in Nissan. And with that came a man who would become one of the most famous, and eventually infamous, executives in automotive history. Chapter 8. Enter Carlos Ghosn. Carlos Ghosn was not your average executive. Born in Brazil to Lebanese parents, raised in Lebanon, educated in France, he was the world's most interesting accountant. Renault brought him in because he had a reputation. He could fix failing companies and do it fast. His nickname? Le Cost Killer. No, seriously, that was his actual reputation in France. If you saw him walking down your hallway during a corporate restructuring year, you started updating your resume. Nissan needed a miracle. They got a man with a machete. Chapter 9. Cuts, cuts, and more cuts. Ghosn's first move? He told Nissan's board the truth. You're screwed. His second move? He laid out a brutal, aggressive turnaround plan called the Nissan Revival Plan, or NRP. The plan included closing 5 factories, eliminating thousands of jobs, cutting procurement costs by 20%, slashing the number of platforms, killing unprofitable models, restructuring the entire supplier network. Japan was shocked. The Japanese business culture valued patience and harmony. Ghosn brought efficiency and consequences. And weirdly enough, it worked. Nissan went from losing billions to making billions in just 1 year. By 2001, Nissan was profitable again. By 2003, they were one of the most profitable automakers on the planet. Ghosn didn't just revive Nissan, he resurrected them. Chapter 10. When Ghosn said he'd revive Nissan, he meant it. Out went the bland, outdated 90s lineup. In came some of the most exciting cars the company had produced since the golden era. The 350Z, the Titan, the GT-R were just some of the highlights during Nissan's revamp in this period. And of course, the introduction of Infiniti only grew Nissan's presence here in the States. Of course, having a crown jewel like the GT-R doesn't hurt. A nuclear warhead disguised as a Japanese sports coupe, a car that ate supercars for breakfast, that made Ferrari sweat. That made Porsche file complaints. A 500 to 600 horsepower twin-turbo monster with launch control that practically violated the laws of physics. The GT-R was the final proof. Nissan was back. Chapter 11. Ghosn the Rock Star. No, seriously. Ghosn didn't just become a successful CEO. He became a full-on celebrity in Japan. They made an anime about him. They made a manga series. He appeared in TV commercials. His approval rating was higher than some prime ministers. Japanese workers literally carried signs with his face, like he was John Lennon arriving at an airport. Nissan's board built this guy a throne. He walked into a room and people bowed. This level of admiration is usually followed by one of 2 outcomes: eternal legacy or dramatic downfall worthy of an HBO miniseries. Guess which one Nissan got? Chapter 12. Nissan switches gears. Or switches to a CVT, perhaps? Here's the part of the story most people forget. Nissan invented the modern mass-market electric car. Tesla gets all the hype today, but back in 2010, Tesla was still trying to convince people the Roadster wasn't just a laptop battery taped to a Lotus. Meanwhile, Nissan rolled out the Leaf, the world's first genuinely mainstream EV. The Leaf wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, it wasn't trying to be cool. It was practical, affordable, reasonably reliable, and shockingly successful. While other automakers were still debating whether EVs were a fad, Nissan had already opened dealerships with charging stations. They beat the entire industry by a full decade. Chapter 13. Incredible success. Head-scratching moves. People forget how big the Leaf was. Over 650,000 units sold. The world's best-selling EV until 2020. Used as taxis in multiple countries. Fleet car of choice for eco-conscious companies. Cheap to run, cheap to maintain, cheap to insure. The Leaf should have been Nissan's ticket to a clean energy empire. They had the head start, the infrastructure, the customer base, the technical know-how, even government partnerships. And then, for some reason, they did absolutely nothing with this momentum. It's like setting the world record in the 100-meter dash and then retiring immediately to focus on making sandwiches. Chapter 14. What went wrong? Ghosn believed EVs were the future. He predicted they would make up 10% of the global market by 2020. He wasn't right, but he wasn't insane either. Nissan was early, too early. The Leaf's biggest issues were limited range, slow fast charging, aging battery chemistry, lack of long-term investment. Nissan created a miracle, but then stopped funding the miracle. Meanwhile, Tesla said, "Thanks for warming up the crowd," and sprinted past them like Usain Bolt running from a bee. Chapter 15. Carlos Goes for a Ride. On November 19th, 2018, Carlos Ghosn, Nissan's hero, savior, celebrity CEO, was arrested in Japan. It was the automotive version of watching Batman get hauled off by Gotham PD. Except instead of Commissioner Gordon, it was Japanese prosecutors, and instead of vigilantism, it was charges of underreporting income, shifting personal investment losses onto Nissan, and misusing company funds. Japanese news exploded. Global media exploded. Nissan's stock didn't explode, it cratered. The man who saved Nissan was now the man who might have been strangling it financially behind the scenes. Chapter 16. It's all downhill from here. Here's where it gets spicy. Ghosn wasn't just arrested because prosecutors built a case. He was arrested because people inside Nissan wanted him out. For years, Ghosn expanded Renault's control over Nissan. Nissan execs felt trapped in a marriage where Renault made the decisions and Nissan brought home the paycheck. When Nissan's profits started slipping around 2016 to 2017, the board saw an opportunity. They didn't just cooperate with prosecutors, they practically gift-wrapped Ghosn with a bow on top. Internal emails later revealed Nissan brass had been planning a legal coup. Chapter 17. The product line begins to fall apart. After Ghosn's arrest, Nissan's leadership looked like a Subway sandwich that had been stepped on. Flat, messy, and not holding together. Executives resigned. New ones came in. They resigned, too. Internal factions took over. Renault and Nissan argued like a divorced couple who still shared a garage. The company lost direction, lost cohesion, lost urgency. Even worse, they lost something they couldn't afford to lose: momentum. Chapter 18. Is Nissan in real danger? The numbers don't lie, and they're not pretty. Let's talk numbers, because numbers don't care about nostalgia or your childhood poster of an R34 GT-R. From 2017 to 2023, Nissan's global market share dropped. Nissan's profit margins shrank. Nissan's R&D spending fell behind rivals. Nissan's stock slid, then flatlined into zombie mode. Nissan's China operations tanked, thanks to BYD and SAIC eating everyone for breakfast. In an industry moving faster than ever, electrification, autonomy, software-defined vehicles, Nissan isn't leading. They aren't even following. They're watching. Somewhere between confused and exhausted. This isn't "the company is dying tomorrow" bad, but it is "the company is quietly losing relevance" bad. Chapter 19. What does this mean for the future? When Nissan launched the Leaf in 2010, they were a decade ahead of everyone. In 2024, Tesla is dominating. Hyundai and Kia are surging. Ford, GM, and Stellantis have awakened. China is flooding the world with cheap, high-quality EVs. Even Mazda is trying again. And Nissan? Nissan released the Ariya. Ariya is pretty good. Very late. Too expensive. not class-leading, launched in tiny volumes, overshadowed by everyone else. The Leaf should have led to a Leaf Plus, a Leaf SUV, a Leaf performance variant, a dedicated EV platform, a global charging strategy, a full EV lineup by 2020. Instead, Nissan spent almost a decade making minor updates while the competition lapped them 3 times. Remember when Nokia laughed at smartphones? Yeah. Chapter 20. What's in store for Nissan's future? Nissan's story is one of ambition, collapse, resurgence, innovation, and struggle. A story with some of the highest highs and lowest lows in automotive history. But the road ahead isn't written yet, and Nissan's best chapters don't have to be in the past. If they can reconnect with their heritage, if they can rebuild trust, if they can innovate boldly, if they can remember what made them legendary, their past and heritage. It's every kid who had a poster of the R34, every dad who taught his son how to shift in a 240 SX, every Uber driver who bought a Leaf, every GT Academy driver who entered motorsport because Nissan gave them a chance. When Nissan loses its way, the automotive world loses a piece of its soul. Then the next chapter won't be about survival. It will be about dominance. But that choice is Nissan's, and Nissan's alone. Thanks for sticking to the end here, guys. This is Hope from Pro Street TV. Thanks again for all the continued love and support. And if you enjoy long-form videos like this, please consider subscribing to Pro Street TV today. And don't forget to check out the lowest prices on parts at www.prostreetonline.com.